We are live on Facebook. Now, Josh, are we jumping right in or am I stalling for time here for people to jump on?
Oh, that's
with
up to
us?
you.
Okay, that's up to me. You know, we'll stall a little bit.
Yeah.
But no, we're glad that you could join us live, whether you're on Facebook or you're joining us on YouTube or you're watching this later. Of course, we hope that we could all be together tonight in the park. And, you know, it's funny, I've been saying today, the one thing you can kind of count on is that it's not really going to rain very often in Minnesota in the fall until, of course, today. It decided to send us for a little bit of a loop. So here we are. The good news is that the weather forecast looks glorious for tomorrow morning. So we will be, if you're watching this on Saturday night, we will be together tomorrow morning for 𝒊𝒏𝒌𝒔 Sunday. We're looking forward to all the sort of special things that we do with that. And of course, one of the highlights of this weekend is something that's really a couple years in the making, is we're having Will and Tasha Archer join us from the Potomac Valley. They were going to originally, we talked to them about joining us last year, and then with COVID and everything, and of course we didn't even have an in-person 𝒊𝒏𝒌𝒔 service, we decided to wait until they could come and join us in person this year. And so now, irony of all ironies, we're live streaming tonight, but we're going to work that out anyways, and you're going to get to see them in the flesh in the morning. I could sit here and go on and on about all that they've done and accomplished, and they've got all those bona fides. But ultimately, and they're from the Potomac Valley Church, and they help lead the church there. But I'll just tell you, they are phenomenal disciples of Jesus Christ and great community builders. And they're going to talk to us tonight about community and building community. And I'm excited because it's such an amazing thing when you get somebody that's speaking about something that they're actually really accomplished at and they've done really well. And I'm saying all that because they're not going to tell you that. They're not going to tell you what a great job they're doing. I'm going to tell you that. But I have sort of internet stalked you guys for a couple of years. Of course, we've become friends. We've talked. Well, we know each other.
Yeah.
It's not just weird.
Right.
But I have internet stalked them a little bit. And I watch their church and I watch what they've done. And it really is amazing stuff, what they do in building community and creating community there in the Potomac Valley Church, both before the pandemic, through the pandemic, and I'd like to say after the pandemic, but I think that's probably
on the back
premature.
end.
On the back end, hopefully. Hopefully we're not watching this clip like 6 years later and be like, who would have thought? No. But no, they've done a great job with that. They do a great job with directing the social media and the media things that they do in the church there as well. So we're really fortunate to be able to get to learn from them this weekend and have them here. I'm really excited, and I hope you are too. We are going to have a time at the end for question and answers. So if you want to do that, you have 3 options, and we'll see how this goes. You can leave a comment on YouTube if you're watching on YouTube. You can leave a comment on Facebook, or you can text me and do it that way. If you don't have my number, then too bad. I'm not going to give it out live on Facebook. But you can text me if you have my number. Only while we're live. Do not watch this later. If you're watching this in a recording, don't text me a question because I won't be happy about that. But plus, you won't get to your question asked or answered at that point. And the sooner you do that, the better. And we'll try to catch it on the comments on YouTube and Facebook as best we can. So without further ado, I think I'm going to turn it over to Will and Tasha. Thanks so much for joining us, and take it away.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, we're super grateful to be able to connect with all of you. And we just want to say that we just landed this afternoon, and we're just blown away by your hospitality already. Michael got us checked in at a local hotel here, and we had a beautiful basket, and we got these cool Minnesota
Look
sweatshirts.
at this. We're twins. We're twins.
That's right, man. So we had to rock them, and they're really comfortable.
Yes.
And and whoever made these champion, if you want to send some money to the church, you can definitely do that. We're rocking your swag. But definitely, it's such an honor to be here, with the Two Cities Church. And to be able to really talk about community. So we'll tell you a little bit about us and kind of where we come from. And then we're going to share some things from the scriptures, share some practical thoughts. But we're really eager to hear about your questions. And whether you ask those questions on YouTube or Facebook, or you text Michael if you have his number, if you text him, or if we just are able to talk tomorrow when you come to the Sumonier service and we're able to kind of talk a little bit about community. We really do believe that a focus on building healthy, authentic community is the future of church. And we believe that's also the history of the church that Jesus built, really being the church. But the future, in terms of where we're going, it's all leaning towards building healthy, authentic community. So my name's Will. This is Tasha.
Hi, everybody.
And we've been married for 22 years last month. And we have 2 kids. And Tasha will tell you a little bit about our family.
Yeah, so we have these 2 wonderful children. One is not really a child anymore. He's 18, and he just went off to college, a month ago. Feels like it's been forever that my baby's been gone. And then I have a 13-year-old little girl who's in the 8th grade, and she is a lot of fun. 13-year-old girl. That's all I need to say.
Awesome. And we've both been Christians for a while.
Yes.
I've been a Christian for 28 years, and Tasha's been a Christian for 25 years. And we started out in the full-time ministry serving in Atlanta, Georgia, around 24 years ago. And we were in the ministry for about a decade, serving in different cities. And we've served together in 6 different cities, North American cities, including one Caribbean country in the Bahamas. We served in the Bahamas for about 4 years. And but
somebody had to do it, and so
someone did.
We did it. We had such a good time. We were there for about 4 years and built incredible relationships and learned so much. And then we were also introduced to Good Enough Parenting and I Choose Us during that time, and that changed our lives and our marriage, and and then we moved on to.
Yeah, and we, before I go into where we moved on to, let me just go a little bit further back. To right when our daughter was born. Our daughter was born in May of 2008, and in July of 2008, Tasha was really kind in letting me go to Indonesia to go and serve on a Hope Youth Corps. And, and we had our young son and our newborn baby, and Tasha stayed in Philly while I went to Indonesia. But that trip to Indonesia changed my life and then changed our lives, because what we saw there 13 years ago in Indonesia, what continues on in the work that they're doing in Jakarta and throughout Indonesia and now throughout Southeast Asia, is a real commitment to community, a real commitment to building relational and not transactional community. And that really changed our ministry philosophy. So I came back from that trip. Tasha and I talked a lot. That fall, we fasted. About 4 months after that, that was July, August, going into August of 2008. January of 2009, we fasted together for 40 days for God to really make things plain. And then we made a decision that spring of 2009 to go to the Bahamas and serve there. But we made that decision in large part because we saw a working model of healthy community, and we wanted to be a part of really building that from the ground up. And so that's really what we've been pursuing these past 13 years, is how do you really build healthy spiritual communities? And, one of the scriptures that's really been an anchor scripture for us is right in Matthew chapter 9. In Matthew chapter 9, and in verse 35, it says, Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues and preaching the good news of the kingdom and healing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send workers into his harvest field. Now, just a quick bit of context going a little bit back to what I was saying in 2008. In 2006, Tasha and I, we were asked to do a radio show in Philly. And we're really honored. Incredible disciple of Jesus, an incredible radio exec, Elroy Smith, gave us the opportunity to be able to get and have 2 hours of live talk on Praise 103.9. And I'll tell you, that experience changed us because we're talking to people in America's 5th largest media market, and there are literally thousands of people that were responding. And within the first 12 weeks, that show that we're doing on a Sunday night with 2 hours straight was #1 on the urban charts, and it was on the top 10 of all the charts in Philly at the time. And we were literally just having a conversation, asking people how they're doing. There's such hurt and pain that we saw, and that's continued on, and that's really grown exponentially. And it broke our hearts because we were getting in all of what was going on in the Philadelphia community at the time. And we were trying to figure out how the church would respond to it. And our churches in 2006, 2007 were not as responsive as we needed to be to engage in the community. And we knew something was broken. So when we went to Indonesia and we saw something working in a country that has the largest Muslim population in the world, we're like, we have to study this. We really have to learn what's going on. And that really informed our thinking. And this scripture is true. You know, right now, people are harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. And if you're not convinced of that, just, you know, please stay on and watch this while you're watching it on YouTube and Facebook. But after this conversation we have about community, just take a look at Facebook and YouTube. Just take a look at the media. Talk to people in your community. What you'll find is people are desperately looking for God. And Jesus saw that, and Jesus sees that, and he says to us, pray to the Lord of the harvest, therefore, for workers. We need to be the community that responds to the real needs of what's really going on. And there's a lot really going on in the world.
It was so interesting doing that radio show because, I mean, we all know that there are people who are hurting. We know that. And we get to see bits and pieces of it, definitely. But on that show, I felt like we got a chance to see it up close and personal, where people would call in. We're talking about the Bible, and people would call in and tell us what they were going through. And it didn't matter what stage of life they were in, whether they were single, whether they were married, it didn't matter. They just felt like, you know what, I trust you. And these are people they've never met before. And they felt like, I can talk to you, I can't talk to anybody else. And that blew my mind. People were calling and writing us letters, and I just felt helpless. Like, how do I help these hurting people? There are so many people who are looking for God, who are looking for the answers of who want to change how they live their lives. And it actually inspired me at that point. I was like, I didn't realize there were so many people out there so desperately searching. And through this pandemic, I think it's just gotten more, and that number's just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And we've needed a platform for people to come out and say, hey, this is something that I need. And people needed to see something positive so they could have some kind of inspiration that things can be different. But we as disciples, we have this answer. Like,
we do.
We get a chance to do something different. We get a chance to meet people in their darkest moments, in their darkest spots, and show them who Jesus is. And that's what this community, this building community, is all about. Because if we're not building community and actually getting to know people, the ones that are actually around us, we won't know how they're hurting. We won't know what they need. We won't know how to be there when they need us.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'd say shifted my mindset is, you know, I became a Christian in 93, and Tasha became a Christian in 96. And, you know, the culture of our church in 93 and 96 was heavily focused on Matthew 28, and kind of remains the culture in many of our churches. And without a doubt, that is the conclusion of our call, is to go and make disciples. But what really helped us was seeing in a non-Christian context, Indonesia, as far as you can get from a Christian context. It's the country with the largest Muslim population in the world, a thriving Christian church. And it helped me to understand that things actually work. There's actually a pattern to the way that Jesus builds ministry. So he says here in Matthew 9, the harvest is plentiful, the workers are few. Yet pray to the Lord of the harvest. In Matthew 22, when asked what's the greatest commandment, Jesus explains that it's to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength, and to love your neighbors yourself. Matthew 22 forms a foundation of thinking about how you see the world. Like, you need to love God with everything, and you need to love your neighbors yourself. Now, the hermeneutical key, since we're here in Minnesota, and I know you guys have like a teacher like Michael Burns here, so you know these fancy words like hermeneutical key. For everybody that's in the internet world on Facebook and YouTube, that means the interpretive key. As in, if you want to understand the whole Gospel of Matthew and you don't want to go to seminary for 4 years, read Matthew 25. You'll get it all. Matthew 25 unlocks the whole gospel because it comes to one simple point. At the end of everything, we'll all stand before God and we'll be divided, sheep and goats, is Jesus' parable that he tells. And he explains that at the end of all things, it won't be about how many degrees you have, what you know, whether you can say Matthew 25 in Greek or Hebrew or Aramaic. It won't be whether you read the Bible from cover to cover. It really will be how you treat people. That's the dividing line. And so what happens is the people that are on the right, the sheep, the king says to them, hey, I was hungry, you fed me. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was naked, I was a stranger. You responded to my real needs. And they'll say, when did we see you? And he says in verse 40, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me. Now, here's why this is really important. Because loving God and serving people is the progression to multiplying disciples, Matthew 28. And what we realized is our thinking is what needed to change. See, what was happening for many of us is we become Christians, we were taken out of the world, and we want other people to hear the message of the gospel, but we're often bringing the gospel to them in a transactional mindset. Like, how can we give this to you? I'm going to give my time to you so that you can come and be a part of the church, because this is what's really going to help you. But the truth is, people are hurting. The world is complex. There's a lot that's going on. And what we've got to learn to do is just to love God and serve people. And if you do that, what you find is there are a lot of people that want to become disciples of Jesus. So nothing's changed in terms of our conviction about salvation doctrine. But in the past 13 years, everything's changed about our methodology, about how we go about engaging with people. Our hearts have really changed as we've served people, and we're learning how to really serve people. And so tonight we're going to talk about two very simple principles that we've learned in these 13 years that we hope is really helpful to the two you live. And we're going to talk about how to lead your community, because we are called to be a city on a hill. We're called to lead. And I'm not talking about you having a leadership title in church. I'm talking about you being a representative of Christ to anyone that you meet so that you can lead people down the path of righteousness. So we're going to talk really practically about all of that. So as we talk about learning our community, what would you say about that, Tosh?
Learning our community. All right.
I guess more specifically, as we're talking about really learning how to make friends. So let's just talk about how you've been learning how to make friends. We've been learning how to make friends.
If you insist.
Yes.
All right. So here's what's funny. When we, where do I start? Let's start with Jesus. All right. So earlier today, we were talking about Jesus, and we were getting all excited about it. We were like, man, there are just so many things I see about how Jesus lived that we just didn't do. So, for instance, Jesus, he just never seemed to be in a hurry, ever. He seemed to always have time to have these deep conversations with people, random people. It didn't matter who it was. They didn't have to be long-term friends in order for them to have a deep conversation. He didn't have, because he wasn't rushing, he made time to be at the parties. He made time to be around people that weren't like him. Like he had time. He had time to be a friend. And I thought about it. I was like, man, that's just not how we live. We are always busy, always running around. Even in my neighborhood where I live, there's always parties. Did I ever go to the parties? No, okay? Because I had a million other things that I was doing that I thought were more important, But that's actually where I meet my neighbors. That's actually where I meet the people who are around me. That's where Jesus would have been at the party at my neighborhood, all right? So here's the thing. I thought about how Jesus was like this, and you might think, well, I mean, he was Jesus, he knew what people were thinking and what they needed and all of the above. But okay, so yeah, that's true. He was Jesus, but also he lived in a certain way that we can actually imitate. We were talking about how he didn't start his ministry till he was 30 years old. What did he do? All those 30 years, he was just friends. He watched, he studied, he learned the culture. He learned how people respond to things. He learned what's important to people. He learned people's life stories. Like he learned, he watched, he loved people. He took the time to be with them. Yeah. And that's what we can do. That's how we can imitate him. Yes.
Yeah, to that point, I think this is really important. Jesus was really fluid in understanding and fluent in understanding his culture. Yeah. And he used examples that people understood. He was talking to people. And a lot of times we talk over people. Like many of us that have been Christians for a long time, we're like fluent in Kinglish. Like we talk to people in Kinglish and we're trying to break everything down. Like most people don't talk like that. They don't have a quiet time. And they're like, quiet time, like, you mean like you turn off everything in your house? You turn your phone? Like
right.
You've got to talk to people where they are. So I think learning your community in part is really learning how to talk to people in a language that they can understand and also engaging with them. And this is something that Jesus just did from cover to cover.
Yeah. So I'll just share with you what I started doing, what we started doing as a couple in our neighborhood to try and, be like Jesus. And in this case, we weren't quite like Jesus. This was like a trial run. So I'll just explain to you the things that went wrong. All right. So we moved into our neighborhood. We had Bible talk in our neighborhood, which is a small group discussion about the Bible. And we invited all our neighbors to come, and they all started coming, and they were coming consistently, and that was wonderful, great, and awesome. But where we fell short was the in-between times, the actually being friends with them, the actually being there when they needed us things, the making times to have dinner with them, to take them out to coffee, or to just invite them over to just chill out, or just go on a walk and just talk with them. Like, they live right there, just making time, making space for that. There wasn't that. And those neighbors, of course, slowly fell off. They loved coming to family group, but it's not actually family if nothing's happening in between. Does that make sense? And so that was one way when we went wrong, where we've been looking at it and learning and seeing, okay, what can we do differently? And when I went to Indonesia, the thing that I saw that blew my mind was, this is actually a place where I see people living like Jesus, making time for people, being in people's lives for real. Because I had made excuses in my mind that this can't really be done. Because that was Jesus, I'm Tasha. I'm human. I can't do that. But I saw that it's real and it can be done. And I saw it in the examples of the disciples in Indonesia. I'll give you an example. When I go there, I saw people who were apart, who you couldn't tell who were disciples and who weren't, for one. People were just all very equally involved. So I talked to the people who were studying the Bible, and the way they felt was, of course I'm gonna get baptized. This is my family. I host family groups sometimes. I bring food to family group. I serve at church. I'm a part of this family. This is my family. I'm never leaving. Like, that's how they felt about it. And these people have been there in my hard times, and they've been there to celebrate me in my good times. And these people would normally study the Bible for as long as 3 years, maybe more. Like, they'd study the Bible for a long time. And then I'd ask the disciples. I was kind of interviewing, trying to figure out what is going on here. This is blowing my mind. I asked disciples, okay, so how do you love people for 3 years or so? I'm overwhelmed. And the way they responded was, wow, you know what? I don't even, those 3 years just go by because I've decided I just love them, you know? And my faith is that one day they will make it. And it does not matter when that one day is for me. I'm just gonna love them. I'm gonna love them until they make it, and then I'm just gonna keep loving them. Like, nothing changes after that. I'm just gonna keep loving them. Yeah. And that changed everything for me. And I got back home and I thought, I need to change the way I love. It's just off. It's not like Jesus. And I started praying, God, please increase my capacity to love people. Like, please help me not to be transactional with people. Please help me to just love them and believe that they will make it, that you're saving a spot for them, and that they will make it one day. And please help me not to feel like I have to see it, because I don't. And that was the biggest part for me. So I came back home, I started praying that, and sure enough, you know, I'll give you an example. My daughter, you know, I go to have lunch with my daughter at school. I meet her friends, and I'm like, all right, well, I got to meet her friends' moms. I prayed. You know, I come back to the next event, and I prayed to meet those particular friends' moms, and I'm able to do that. It took us months upon months to set up dinner. We tried real hard. Finally got to eat dinner with them. And then after that, we just became actual friend. Like, she was that first person that I got to be friends with. It didn't matter to me when she made it. It didn't matter. I knew she would. I knew that she just needed to see Jesus through me somehow. And then I introduced her to all my other friends, you know, so she could see Jesus through them. And we all just loved her. And eventually she became a disciple. And then after that, you know, everybody loved up on her husband. He became a disciple about a year later. And it just all, you know, our daughters are still best friends. And it was such a beautiful example for my daughter to be able to see that she loved her friend, and she talks about it. She shares about it. She's like, I'm the one that changed their whole life. I'm the impetus for this. And I'm like, okay, it was Jesus. But
you played your part.
She played her part. And I'm so proud of her for seeing how important that one, you know, her willingness to love this one person, how it really did change somebody's life. It changed a whole family's life.
Yeah, and you know, we've seen this play out a number of times. And so, like, you know, the truth is, we could go on for a long time telling you 13 years of tons of things that we've done wrong, and tons of things that we haven't gotten right. But I can also tell you 13 years of miracles that we've seen.
Yeah.
As we've really shifted our mindset from, like, how can we, you know, how many people are going to become Christians this month? How many people are going to become Christians this year? You know, is the church going to grow? We don't have any question whether the gospel is going to spread and people are going to become Christians. What we do know is this, that healthy bodies grow, but not all growth is healthy. And so we really need to take the time to really ensure that we're building healthy relationships. And a big part of that is being a learner. So you have to learn your community. Get to know the neighbors to the left of you and the neighbors to the right of you. Get to know the people that are around you. Many of us, we go in and out of our communities, serving in and out of our communities, but we don't know the people that are right there. You know, the other thing that we learn on a very practical level is you need to learn your community. So one of the things that I had the opportunity to take advantage of, and one of the other ministers in our congregation is currently in, is a community leadership program. So we live in Prince William County. It's the second largest jurisdiction in Virginia. It's Virginia's first majority-minority county. and the majority of the Christians that are in Potomac Valley live in Prince William, and then a good contingent live in Stafford and Fredericksburg, and some live in DC and Maryland. We're kind of spread out in the metro area, but a good contingent of us live in Prince William. And so I was able to be a part of a community leadership program where I took one Thursday a month for 11 months, a full Thursday, and I got to meet everybody that works in the chief, from the chief of police to everyone that kind of works in local government. I got to understand social services, got an opportunity to sit down with the county demographer to really study the area. Now, by the way, this is what companies do when they want to open a Starbucks or open a Target. They get into the demographics and really learn the community and learn the community leaders. This is what foreign countries do when they really see an interest. If they're like, oh man, we need that resource to be able to use it for our iPhones. They go meet a foreign leaders, and they try to really get to know the community. This is what Jesus did, is he studied the world that he lived in. This is what Paul did. This is what the disciples did. And so this is what we did. And this is what I did specifically, is I sat down and I learned my community. I was really grateful as a part of a cohort of about 39 other professionals. I was the only minister. And they're my friends. And we got to travel together for 11 months. And we still have ongoing friendships. We just got together and had beers and some tacos just like 2 months ago. And I actually 2 weeks ago, I just saw them again. We just sent off the last class. So we've maintained the friendship, but I really got to know my community. And then I made intentional time, and we've made intentional time to sit down. You'd be surprised. We got to know the equivalent to the mayor, so our chair of the board of supervisors, our local elected officials. We got to know Republicans and Democrats because we have a cruciformed approach. We reach out to everyone equally. We got to know, to engage with the Muslim community, to engage with the synagogue and with the Jewish community, to really embed ourselves in our local community and truly get to know the people that are there. Learning our community has changed everything because it's opened up doors for people to know that we're there to help. And you never want to give a baker bread. A lot of us, we're giving people what they already have instead of asking them what they really need.
Every single conversation that we have with all these officials starts with, how can we help you? How can we serve you? What are the needs? Because we don't want to give you something you don't need. So how can we step in and help you in any way? Every single time they're blown away by that because no one ever asked that. They always want to know what you can do for me. So this is another way of being like, this is what I think Jesus would have done. How can I meet you where you are? How can I be of help to you?
Yeah, and I just want to give credit where credit's due. This idea came from Sonny Sessions when we were in Athens, Georgia. Sonny said, the church in Athens, we have $5,000. And he said, Will, I want you to go make an appointment with the mayor and tell the mayor that you have $5,000 and you have 200 volunteers and ask her what she needs.
And we thought, what? You don't just go make an appointment with the mayor.
Like, who does that?
But actually, it was pretty easy.
Oh my gosh.
Just go in.
And when we came in with $5,000 to give her, but
she didn't know that yet.
She didn't.
It was easy
we just
to
set
make
up
the
appointment.
Yeah.
And then and we ended up doing this program called, Athens Stomps Out Poverty, or ASAP. And we served the elderly community. She was really passionate about issues of aging, and we used that $5,000 to help the elderly community. And she was like, you actually have 200 volunteers, and you actually gave real money to help people. What church is this? And it helped us to see that you got to ask questions. Now, you might not be so disposed as to go talk to public officials, but you're part of a homeowners association. Get to know the people that are on that. You're part of a community group, or you could be a part of a PTA, or you could be a part of a karate association. Whatever the thing is.
Anything that you love.
That you love and that you're involved in. Get to know the people there, because wherever you are, Jesus says that you're called to be the light of the world, that we're called to be the light of the world. Wherever you are, you're called to be the salt of the earth. And so learn your community. And when you learn, it's going to open up some incredible opportunities for you to lead. So let's talk about leading.
Yeah. You want to share about yesterday? You want to share about yesterday?
Yesterday would be great. Yeah, we can start there.
Okay. So yesterday, so we just came back from a wedding, and there was a rehearsal dinner on Thursday night and a wedding on Friday night, and this is a sweet young couple that we did premarital counseling with. Yeah, we did premarital counseling with, and they're not yet a part of our church. So, this was a great way to get to know them and serve them. And we started, working through a book, I Choose Us, for their premarital counseling. So we come to their rehearsal dinner 2 nights ago, and we're talking with their friends. These are 2 young men. And they say, wait a second, they've been telling us about you guys' conversations. What's this book that you're talking about? And so they're like, this is something I need in my life. One of them shares, man, I need to get back to a place where me and God are tight. And I don't know what direction to take in order to do that. The other one's like, man, I got things from my past that are affecting the way that I am today. And I need to know what to do about that. And we're just like, whoa, you're so vulnerable. We just met.
and here's what's crazy. So the groom, all these young men grew up together. So they grew up together from middle school, high school.
Yes.
They play Xbox together every night.
Yes.
This is his inner circle.
Yeah.
They're all a part of the wedding party, and we're at the rehearsal dinner. So they know us by how we're helping their friend.
Right.
And I think there's a little bit of backstory that you should know. So 5 years ago, we did this young man's mom's wedding. And that's how we got to serve them, because they were living across the street from a disciple. They needed a minister to do their wedding. We served them and did their wedding. And
they were not yet
They weren't
a part
yet.
of the church. They weren't disciples yet.
But then a year later or so, maybe 6 months later, they studied the Bible. They got baptized. This couple did. And we've been a part of their life. And we've been a part of their good times and their bad times. And so when their son wanted to get married, their son's like, oh, we know the minister we would go with. We'll ask Will and Tasha if they can be a part of this. But it was the wildest thing being at this rehearsal dinner and seeing what you were just talking about.
Oh, yeah. And, as we're talking about how you learn, what's the phrase you use? Learn how to lead your community. This is such a natural way to lead your community. You build trust, and people feel like they feel like they trust where you're coming from. They feel like they can be open with you. And then their hearts are open to you leading them. And then you lead them to Jesus. And that's just the key. We ended up going through the fellowship the next day. Well, the fellowship, I guess.
The reception.
The reception, sorry. We ended up
Which
going.
was the fellowship.
Yeah, fellowship to me.
So that's our language.
And we ended up going around talking to people in the reception the very next day at the wedding. And this young lady just said, she also knew who we were. And she just said, hey, I was just wondering, do you guys just mentor people? Wow. And we were like, sure.
And it's important to know that this young lady is a young lady that's Muslim. So she's a practicing Muslim young lady that's here at a Christian wedding. And we're having a conversation. She's like, yeah, because I would love to connect my friends with you.
Yeah.
For you to mentor them. And we're like, this is insane.
Okay.
It defies all reason. But it's because people really are searching. And if they know that you actually care, oh my goodness, that changes the game completely. Yeah. So it's really important that you learn your community so that you can lead your community. Now I want to share a scripture that really helps us with this, and it's in Deuteronomy 28. And I'm going to tell you the dark side of this, and then the powerful positive side of this. So the dark side of what's happening right now in our world really plays out in Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 64. And actually we'll start in verse 65. It says, among those nations you will find no repose, no resting place for the sole of your foot. There the Lord will give you an anxious mind and eyes weary with longing and a despairing heart. You will live in constant suspense, filled with dread, both night and day, never sure of your life. In the morning you will say, if only it were in the morning you'll say, if only it were evening, and in the evening you'll say, if only it were morning, because of the terror that will fill your hearts and the sights that your eyes will see. What we're hearing from Moses here, he's telling the people that when people live outside of obeying God's command, that they live in a constant state of suspense. That literally every day people wake up and they're like, if only it were evening. And every night they're like, I can't wait till there's just a constant dread. People are never sure of their lives. And you add COVID to the mix, people feel unsure of their lives. Before COVID, in America, we were dying the deaths of despair. People were committing suicide at record numbers. Drug overdoses were at record numbers. Through COVID, that's continued. What you'll notice is many churches closed down, but the ABC stores, that's we call them in Virginia, the liquor stores, they didn't close down. People have struggled with, substance abuse. Domestic violence has been on the rise. And there are cases that we're familiar with personally of people that we've met in the community where people have been victims of domestic violence. And the brokenness in the world is very, 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 very real. Because when you live outside of obedience to God's word and God's will, there's a brokenness, and that's happening, and that's pervasive. Now, why that's really important is because of the contrast of what God is inviting us as believers to live out. And the contrast is found at the beginning of Deuteronomy 28. And Tasha, I'm just going to ask you if you wouldn't mind just reading this portion right here. What do you want? In Deuteronomy 28, if you can start in verse 1 and then just take us through to verse 6.
Okay.
And then I'm going to share. And then if you can, I'll tell you the other verses afterwards, just 1 to 6.
You can always stop me.
Yeah.
Wherever you want to stop me.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, so Deuteronomy 28:1. If you fully obey the Lord your God and carefully follow all his commands I give you today, the Lord your God will set you high above all the nations on earth. All these blessings will come on you and accompany you if you obey the Lord your God. You will be blessed in the city and blessed in the country. The fruit of your womb will be blessed, and the crops of your land and the young of your livestock, the calves of your herds and the lambs of your flocks. Your basket and your kneading trough will be blessed. You will be blessed when you come in and blessed when you go out.
God says that you'll be blessed in every way. And then God goes on to say this amazing thing here. And Tasha.
In 7?
And actually, if you go to verse 12.
12, okay.
And if you can read verse 12 through verse 14.
The Lord will open the heavens, the storehouse of his bounty, to send rain on your land in season, and to bless all the work of your hands. You will lend to many nations, but will borrow from none. The Lord will make you the head and not the tail. If you pay attention to the commands of the Lord your God that I give you this day and carefully follow them, you will always be at the top, never at the bottom. Do not turn aside from any of the commands I give you today, to the right or to the left, following other gods and serving them. Now,
this is what Moses was telling the Jewish people. This is the promise of God for obeying the ways of God. When we follow God's way, there are blessings that come along with it. He says right here that you will be the head and not the tail, that you will lead your community. And now I'm not talking about having positions, and I'm not talking about having worldly wealth. I'm talking about being people of influence and impact in the community that you live in. This is just who we're made to be. Yeah. This is actually what we're made. We're disciples of Jesus. There's no situation where a disciple of Jesus, you put them in the HOA, they lead the HOA. They don't have to be the president, but they become the most influential person because they're the person.
They also don't have to have like this big personality.
No.
They don't have to be extroverted. No. They can be introverted. They could just be themselves.
And if you need a New Testament reference just to clear this up here, Matthew 11:11, Jesus says that of all the prophets, that John the Baptist is the greatest, but even the least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. It's because the active work of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And tomorrow we're going to talk about the Holy Spirit. We're going to talk about the movement of God's Holy Spirit and God's call for us to really follow the Spirit. So please join us tomorrow for church. But here's the deal. Because the Spirit's in us, we get to lead our community. And so I want to tell you some miracles. And I just want to say, we've made a ton of mistakes. But I want to share these miracles because they testify to God's glory and what he's been teaching us about leading our community. So we decided to do this one thing called a great banquet, where we barbecue a couple 100 pounds of meat, which has now become 1,000 pounds of meat. And prior to the pandemic, we did that 2 times in a row. We barbecued 1,000 pounds of meat. We've just gotten it going again. We got a couple 100 pounds of meat that we did a couple months back to get ourselves prepped up. And this coming Easter, we'll do another 1,000 pounds of meat. And we served the community. We barbecued, we gave away groceries, we just served people. But I got to tell you, it wasn't like, and then, 100 people got baptized. Right. We didn't do it like it wasn't a gimmick. We just did it to serve. And the community knows that we just give willingly. We have open hands. And so our community knows us as those people that do the barbecue and that serve the community. Because of that, it opened the door for us to work with a community organization called ACTS. ACTS does incredible work. They've been in our community over 50 years. And we're able to head up an event that they did called the iWalk, where over 2,000 people came, and the church, led that prior to the pandemic in 2019. We're able to be the leaders of that effort for the iWalk. Amazing thing that happened on the day of the race. The largest number of runners were from the mosque, and it was so amazing. I was emceeing everything, and we were able to give the mosque a massive shout out for the great work that they did. And then we went over to the booth to encourage the mosque for the great work that they did. And today I was talking to a friend of mine that's a part of the mosque, a part of the leadership of our local mosque, about how we can work together to really serve the community. These are ongoing relationships that we're making as we're showing people, Christian and non-Christian, who the church is. And they know that there are Christians that treat them with respect, Christians that love all people, Christians that lead in their community. When everything went down last year in 2020, and I know it's been very difficult here, but it's very difficult where we live too. Our highest ranking local official, the equivalent to our mayor, reached out to us and said, hey, we need to have a community conversation. And we'd like to ask you to host the first community conversation we have, because we know that your church doesn't take sides. We know that you're going to be safe. You're not going to swing to the right or to the left. And we're able to get with the chief of police at the time and able to get with some key community leaders, both from different faith traditions as well as just people that are local elected officials. These are ongoing relationships where we've been able to lead. Now, we don't have a title. We don't have an office. We're disciples. We're able to really lead.
We're just known as the people who are willing to help.
Right. And you want to be that to your neighbor. So it doesn't have to be anything that's public or out there. And I just want to say, for everybody that's listening on Facebook and YouTube, it's not because there's anything special about us. No. It's because of God. Because as God's people, we should not be at the bottom. We should be at the top of influencing the world that we live in. 2 other really crazy things that happened. We're able to be a part of a community organization that was able to respond to needs. And our local jurisdiction got several $1 million of CARES funds. And 26 organizations were selected to help distribute some of those funds. And we were the 26th. We were the last one selected, but we're the 26th group that was selected. And last year we were entrusted with distributing $450,000 worth of CARES funds. And we're able to find 200 families outside of our church to make sure that if they need to keep their lights on, that we could get them connected with the help that they needed. They need to stay in their home, they could get their mortgage paid for. It's not our money, it was federal money that was given to a local jurisdiction, that was given to a local community organization, and then we were able to be the hands and feet on the ground, engaging and serving. I can't tell you the number of stories and the heartbreak and the joy and the gratitude of single moms and people that were at their last leg not even knowing if they could stay in their house during a pandemic, that we're able to connect with. And again, we're able to use opportunities to serve. The last thing is, obviously, we're talking about COVID, and we're able to work with our local health department and the state health department and the NAACP to help 12,000 people get signed up to get vaccinated. And wherever you stand on the whole vaccine situation, I just want to say this. We're able to help people get vaccinated. And we're able to be one of Virginia's first herd immunity faith communities, where we're able to make sure the overwhelming majority of us were able to get vaccinated. And I respect whatever position you have. All I'm saying is, when things go down, are you the person in your neighborhood that people know to go to? When things go down, are you the person in your city that people know to go to? When things go down, are you the person in the county that you live in that people know to go to? When things went down, when you ran out of wine at a wedding, they knew where to go. You know, when you've been out in the elements for a couple of days listening to an amazing preacher, you know, Jesus was able to multiply food so that he could meet the physical needs as well as the spiritual needs of people. This is who we've always been, by the way. This is not like a new concept. This is Acts 2 played out. This is the story of the early church. This is who the church has always been. And it's who we need to get back to being. We need to learn where we live, and we need to lead where we live. Learning your community and leading your community is so critical. The last thing I just want to share, and Tasha will have the very last word, but the last thing I want to share is, it's important to be engaged in your community. It's important to be embedded in your community. But it's also really important that you don't get entangled. You know, and I know that, you know, there's been a lot of great work that's been done here in the Two Cities Church, really talking about not getting entangled in the culture. Don't take sides. Don't show partiality. Don't choose one group over the other. Serve everyone. And we've learned that it's important to take a crucified approach, a cruciformed approach of loving those on the right just as much as we love those on the left. Let's learn our communities and let's lead our communities. Because I got to tell you, serving our communities, that's the future of church. And I hope this conversation encourages you. And we are struggling to make sense of this, but we're really grateful for God reorienting us 13 years ago. And we hope these few things help you just to be the church where you are.
Yeah. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to just come have a great conversation with you. We do wish it were in person, but what we are excited about is tonight we do get a chance to have a question and answer session. We'll do our best to do that, however that works out. If there's any questions, we'd love to be able to accommodate you in that way. But other than that, we'd love to be able to meet you tomorrow. That would be our one-on-one personal time. That would be the party, okay? But we're so grateful that we got a chance to be with you tonight, and thank you for inviting us.
Very, very honored.
Yes.
And very grateful to our community for the trust, if you're watching this, that you've extended to us. It has blown us away that we have friends both within the faith community and outside of the faith community, both within the Christian community and outside the Christian community, friends across the board. And we just pray to actually be Christians to you in what we do. So that's what we got. So send us your questions, and then we're going to try to, I hope you have Michael's phone number so you can text him.
Yeah. So I'm just going to join on in. I'm crashing the party.
Yes.
I'm gonna sit down because it looks weird when I stand up.
That's all
okay.
right. That's all right. We're good. You're a teacher. You can stand over. It's no problem.
Oh, that's terrible. Oh, I have to hold this up, don't I? I had it down. Okay. Is that better? There we go.
That's
There you
cool.
go.
You make it look good.
Well, let me say thank you guys so much for what you shared. Thank you for being here. Of course, as the way these things work, we moved it inside because it was raining, and now the sun's starting to come out. And
It's all good.
Things are drying up, but it was raining when we started.
Yes,
so,
it was.
that's how those things go.
Yes.
But we're very inspired by what you guys shared, and I know I really appreciate it. there was a lot of people watching and sending messages. I see there's a few questions coming in now. A lot of people were more just comments of how great this is. This is so convicting. This is great. Glad you guys came. This makes so much sense. One old crusty guy that's a friend of mine said, I like him.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. He's not that old.
Yeah.
But crusty.
But it's great.
Yeah. So a lot of that. And there are a few specific questions. I think some of the comments where this is so clear. I know for me, every time I thought of a question, and we had a couple early on that were sent to me, you guys answered it very clearly.
Oh, amen.
And so it's like, well, I don't have to ask that now. There are a few, and we'll see if more continue to come in here now that you guys are done. But what are some practicals for an individual to start learning about their community?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first place is I'd say pray. Prayer is where I would start, honestly. I think you've got to pray, and we've been praying this very consistently over the past 13 years, is praying for God to increase our heart. Because when you see what's really going on, it could overwhelm you. So I think you've got to pray, God, please increase my capacity to love. I think other than that, I think just ask questions. So I think talking to your neighbors and asking them what they need and asking them what they're going through and how they're feeling. Going online and studying the demographic. Like, I'm a big numbers person, so like looking at the numbers, sitting down with the county demographer was very important for us, for me in particular, because now I know where the pockets of poverty are in our community. Talking to different, social service leaders or human service leaders, where are the real needs, so that we're not just we're trying to address this need, but that's, someone else has really done that. I think another practical is find other organizations that are doing the things that you really want to do and partner with them. Yeah. This was a very new thing for us because, a lot of us as believers, definitely in our family of churches, we're FUBU people. So we're like, for us, by us. If it's not our thing, we're not doing it.
Right.
And that mentality can only take you so far. There's a real power in local collaboration.
Yes.
So I'd say ask questions. If people get the sense you really care and want to know, they're going to really tell you. You just got to be ready to really want to hear it, because the needs are, there are a mountain of needs. And then you got to pray for God to give you wisdom to, find your lane where you can this is what I'm going to really engage in.
Yeah. And that's excellent. This is something that you can do as a family. This is something you can do as a family group together. I'll give you an example. This looking for organizations that are doing things that you're passionate about. There are several of our family groups that have done just that. They have looked into organizations that are serving people in ways that they're passionate in, and they call them up, and first of all, they all talk about it as a group, and they're all excited about it. And so, once you get buy-in from your whole group, you're all ready to go serve somebody and go get to meet people in the community. Well, that's what they've done. So they call them up and they say, what are the needs? What kind of holes do you have in your community? How can we help? And then they just become pillars in that community. They're the ones they call when they need help. They're the most reliable volunteers that they have.
And that's huge.
Yeah, and that's huge. It's huge. And so they've built trust, with those community organizations that they've decided to give their hearts to.
There's this idea, and we'll talk a little bit more about this probably tomorrow, but this idea of commander's intent. The commander's intent, Jesus' intent for us, is that we would evangelize the world, that we would actually share the gospel with all people. He is really intentional about making us different. And so I think a lot of times we have one way that we think things should go. But the early church, and I know you're really big into this, just from being a teacher and being passionate about history, is it was a really out of control. Like there was this movement of the Spirit where things, and I think if you recognize that the needs are so massive that if every Christian can find different ways that they connect with people, we bring Christ into all of those situations. So I don't know I hope we've answered the question in terms of practicals, but I think prayer, asking questions about the area, you're gonna find that the doors are so open to people right now if you really are willing to walk through them.
Yep.
No, that's great. That's a very good answer. We continue to get more thankful responses, and this was great. Such good direction, encouragement, things of that nature. Here's a specific question. What do the relationships in the family groups you're bringing people into look like? How do those get built up too?
Yeah, so we're in the middle of doing this. So just so you know, we're actually in the middle of reshaping our family groups to make them smaller, because through the pandemic, we kind of have some family groups that didn't function as well, some family groups that did function, and the ones that functioned swole up and got really big. And so we're like, now they're like oversized, falling over. So we're trying to right size all of our family groups right now. So everybody in Potomac Valley, I know you were waiting for us to say this, we're a messed up group of people. So just want to let you know, we're messed up. So we're still trying to figure all that out. And so we don't have it all just right. But what do they look like in the best situation? Because we have the bad ones too. I just want to make sure we say that. But in the best situation, I think what they look like is individuals pulling people in and actively engaging with them. And I think what's happened over the past 5 years intentionally in Potomac Valley is we've seen that the culture of the church has shifted towards people taking more time to build relationships, not being as transactional as we were in the past. And so I think people are building healthier relationships, but there's definitely a lot of work that still needs to be done. And COVID's been hard, honestly, Michael, for us, because it's exposed key areas of strength, and it's also exposed a lot of areas of weakness, a lot of areas we need to grow. So I'd say best case scenario, people are really getting pulled in and integrated. And in areas that are not so strong, we know who those people are. We're really actively trying to make sure everybody has a place, is being pulled in. That question is wonderful because it's literally where we live right now in Potomac Valley, is getting everyone in a functional small group.
I will say the groups that do the best, though, are the ones that are having fun outside of family group meeting.
They do life together.
They're doing life together.
Yeah.
They have what do you call those things? Threads. What do you call those? Like group me's or whatever, where they're encouraging each other all the time, and sharing their issues and problems and praying for each other and those types of things. And then the other part that they're doing well, the ones who are doing well, they're serving together. So usually that brings them together on a whole different level because they're passionate about helping somebody or some organization together. So I think those are the best.
Yeah.
So what you're saying, if I can summarize this, is that groups that have great relationships together intentionally have great relationships. Like,
Yes.
Yes, you're right.
Yes.
Yes, it has to be intentional.
Yes.
If they invest in the relationship, lo and behold, there
Yes.
it is.
Yes, you are.
Yes.
Yes.
We make
This
time for
works
each other.
in marriages. This works in a lot of areas.
Ooh,
Yes.
write that down.
Yeah, it works in a whole lot of areas. Yeah, we're just people, man.
Yes.
Sometimes we think, who's doing this perfectly? No one is.
Right.
Everybody's messed up, but you just got to work on it.
No, I appreciate it. And what I love about what you guys do is, you do quantify it a bit and say, hey, here's what we're doing. But at no point, have I ever seen you guys here's the package.
Right.
We've got it figured out. You do this, A, B, C. It's just the simple things.
Yeah.
And it seems to me in studying history that usually the points where God works the most through groups and through people, when you ask them what they're doing, they'll say, nothing really. We're just the simple aspects of the gospel.
Yes.
And that's what works. So I really appreciate that aspect of what you guys are doing. Bunch more questions have come in. What is the biggest lesson you've learned when learning the community?
Yeah. I think, oh my gosh, that's such a great question. What's the biggest lesson? So don't underestimate politics. I think, now this is really relevant for us. We live 20 miles from Washington, D.C., and every group has a power dynamic. And so I think you can't be naive as you're building relationships with people, because people really get comfortable putting you in a box and putting you in groups. And you got to remember that as Christians, we're not called to be partisan. Now, if you support a particular political party, that's great. We respect that. But we're not called to be partisan. We're called to really engage in the world. And so I think don't underestimate that, and have the willingness to make mistakes. And we've made a lot of mistakes. We've said things that were not best, and we've had to apologize. Just expect mistakes, and develop a greater degree of kind of comfort with the fact that you're going to make mistakes. But don't underestimate the fact that there are power dynamics that are going on in situations as you're getting to know people in the community. Take your time to get to know people for real, and you're going to make mistakes. I think probably if I were to distill it down to one thing, you're going to make mistakes. Yeah. That's the biggest thing. And it's okay. Just fall forward. Right. Don't fall back. Don't pull back. Fall forward. Own the mistake. Take extreme ownership. Old Jocko's book, which I really love, Extreme Ownership. Take responsibility for your mistakes and then keep moving forward.
That's great.
I would say my biggest thing is that politicians are people too.
Yes.
People with power are people too. And we all need the same stuff. So there's
just love
one thing I realized, I didn't realize that I'd become like a safe place to certain ones of them, and I didn't realize how much they needed that.
Wow.
And that's what everybody needs.
Yeah.
So.
No, that's great.
It's so easy to demonize people.
Yeah.
It's so easy to demonize people. It's so easy to deify people, think that they're God or they're the devil.
Right.
They're just people,
Well, that's what I was going to ask is, it seems like some of the biblical things about loving your enemies and not gossiping and not talking down about people, that doesn't apply to famous politicians though, right?
It's interesting. Apparently it doesn't in our popular culture.
Right.
But as Christians, it should always apply.
Yeah.
Then it's okay.
Then it's okay. You can say whatever.
Right? And also on Facebook and Twitter. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Because, they don't feel anything.
Right.
And they don't have families.
I mean, Jesus
They're
never
not even
said,
human.
don't say bad stuff about people on social
Oh my
media.
God.
Specifically, he didn't. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. I know.
Okay.
And I mean, he did know the future, so he knew it was coming. He should have known to say it.
No, God.
By the way, this is called sarcasm.
Yeah,
Yes,
that is
we're
sarcasm.
just
This
kidding.
is sarcasm.
And
This is not a quotable moment.
before I get any emails, God, Jesus, Paul, all used sarcasm.
Yes,
So
it's true.
there you go.
Yeah.
In fact, one of my favorite verses is sarcastic. It's
Yeah.
Amos 4:4. Whenever anybody asks me what my life verse is, I say Amos 4:4, where God says, "Oh, go to Bethel and sin, go to Gilgal and sin yet more, for that is what you like to do."
Yes.
You're like, you're saying I should? No.
No.
No, not saying you should.
And right up the street here is Bethel University.
Oh,
so,
wow.
you know,
Oh, no.
So that works out well.
Wow.
I'm kind of combining a couple questions here, but what are some good conversation starters with strangers? My wife is great with meeting our neighbors, and we know almost everyone in our area, but how do we take it to the next level of building relationship?
Yeah. I would just be real with people. Hey, so, COVID's been rough. We're really wanting to reconnect with people. Would you like to have dinner? Or do you want to grab coffee, or tell me about what's been going on with you? What's wild is, people have been disconnected from people, and most people really want to talk.
It's true.
And most people are working endlessly online or endlessly at their jobs and taking care of their kids, taking care of their families, living their lives as single professionals. I think just, what's going on in the world provides a plethora of opportunities to start conversations. What I would caution against is kind of like having almost like a script. A lot of times we're like, okay, and hey, so what do you think about insert local sports team? Hey, and would you like to come to church on Sunday? Like everybody knows that's a script. Don't do that. If you did that, God still works through it. By the way, He works through everything. But just tell people where you are, and talk about how you're doing. And hospitality, though, just breaking bread with people, or sharing cup of coffee or a tea or whatever you do, that opens incredible doors.
Yeah. I'll only add this: if you like parties, throw one. Throw a party for your neighbors. Like, this is a meet my neighbor or get to know you better party. What you can call it whatever you want to call it. Yes.
What if you're a hermit?
And you don't want to be around people.
If you don't want to be around people,
just say, I want to talk to one person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just invite one person over for dinner.
Yeah.
Yes. How about that?
Yeah.
One person over for dinner.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah.
That's beautiful. All right, another question. Thanks so much for sharing. Powerful impact. How can we as a church move away from just hope being the service outlet, but service and community engagement being a priority for the whole church?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I'm really passionate about the service that I've been able to do with Hope. Obviously, our perspective changed through us going on a Hope Youth Corps, me going on a Hope Youth Corps, and a lot of Hope service that we do. And we support a lot of Hope work, particularly in Indonesia, that we support an orphanage there. I think the way that you get away from that is reading the Bible and reading church history. We changed the world 2,000 years ago. When Rome were throwing out their babies, the Christians were the ones picking them up.
That's right.
When Rome was dominating the world, we're the ones that brought the high-ranking officials and the slaves together in a common meal. I mean, we have always been the force of change in the world, and we're going to talk about that tomorrow some. But I think study history and study the Bible. God cares about the poor. And so Hope is a really, really fantastic organization, and they do fantastic work. But if your service to the poor is limited to Hope Worldwide, I think you're going to find Matthew 25 very problematic to explain to Jesus on the day of judgment, unless you are like a Hope junkie. Like if you're just like a regular Christian, you're like, oh yeah, once a year I did my thing. Jesus is going to say, well, how about those times when I was hungry, I was thirsty, I was naked, I was in prison, I was a stranger.
Hope did it.
Hope did it. Like I did, I gave them money.
Yes.
Yeah, I did. Like that's not what Matthew 25 is. It's you doing it.
Yeah.
And so Hope is a great organization to work with. They're a strategic partner with the church. But we've learned that it's important to diversify the way you serve based on your conviction. And it's got to come from that place of conviction. The more I read the Bible, the more deeply convicted I am, Michael, about how serious God is about how we treat people. Because you can tell what people think about God, not based on what they say about God, but based on how they treat people. That's really the gauge.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Michael, my brain just went back to a question that you asked already. What were the No, we got to do it. We got to do it. We got to do it. Because it's a very simple answer, I promise.
Right.
So we talked about, the question was, what are some conversation starters? And I'm like, I don't think we answered that. So some conversation starters are just to realize that people love to talk about themselves. Just that, bottom line, people love to talk about themselves. So ask them where they grew up, ask them what they do for a living, ask them about their families, ask them crazy questions like, man, what's the biggest lesson you've ever learned in your life? People answer these crazy questions. And they're like, but ask them about themselves, anything, anything that you can, even if they have a dog, ask them how the story about their dog, how they got their dog. Ask them anything about themselves. And the Holy Spirit, if you pray about it, Holy Spirit will give you wisdom as to which questions to ask to draw them out.
Okay. No,
Okay.
that's excellent. I do want to get one very disrespectful question out of it,
Oh, no.
which was, did I just come back from changing race car tires?
Oh man.
Oh, no.
At least they were Ferrari tires.
Yeah.
They were Ferrari.
I was given this jacket from my son, and I reached in my closet because I was chilly today and just grabbed the first thing that came out.
It's cool. It's from Puma. I've been eyeing that jacket, man. That's a tight jacket.
Your son has good taste.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a fire jacket right there.
I'm looking on the screen and realizing it's bright.
Oh.
Though.
That's
No.
You guys are all burgundy and matching the chair.
We're literally matching the chair.
Right.
I
Yeah.
noticed that.
That's brilliant. So this is a great question. I'm looking forward to hearing your answer. It's a tough one.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Ready.
Okay.
Okay, here we go.
How can we connect to communities of color that have faced a traumatic event? It's been difficult to connect since the recent riots in Minneapolis. It's like their hope in God is very strained.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really great question. I'm really sobered by you asking that question. Sitting here in this context, we've been praying for you, and we've been praying for not just for this city, but for this state and for our country. And I know we've had private conversations. We've had you on the podcast talking about that. So we're Black. So I can tell you about Black people. I can't represent all Black people, but I can tell you.
Breaking news.
Breaking
Nope.
news. I know. You're like, maybe it was a coloration on the screen
Yeah.
because you're not actually seeing it.
It's a tint.
So yeah, it's a tint. It's a tint. Now, how do you connect with communities of color? I think, here's the thing. And this is Matthew 9. I think really helps us. Jesus looked at what was going on in the world, and he wasn't angry and outraged. He responded with compassion. That's that. And I'm not saying there aren't times for anger and outrage. God shows anger and outrage in the Bible. But I think the key is to respond with compassion. And what I mean by that is a willingness to put yourself in someone else's shoes and really be willing to listen and hear and understand where they're coming from, even if you won't fully understand where they're coming from. So how do you connect? I think first you start with prayer. God, help increase my heart to care about other people. And then you find opportunities to build authentic relationships with people, where you build deep, meaningful relationships with people. And then you do exactly what we've been talking about. You learn the community and you don't give a baker bread. You find out what that community needs. And I think that's as true for the African American community as it is for the Hmong community, as it is for the Somali community, as it is for European communities or communities that are of Caucasian descent. I mean, whatever the community is, I think it's just the willingness to really care and engage and get to know people. I would caution Christians, and I know you've had lots of conversations about this, I'd caution Christians from getting into discourses, meaningless arguments about words. I think we can get so sidetracked in the noise of the day and forget who we are and why we're here. Like, after you, Christian, that's listening to this, got baptized, that was the most saved you were ever going to be. Like, like we could just taken you up to heaven and been done. We're actually here to mature in our faith, but also to help other people to see God. So I think responding with compassion, engaging in the community, learning about the community is really key. And it's wild. Once you care about people, everything else changes. Because people really don't care how much you know. They don't care about your words or your ideas if they don't know that you care. But find ways to serve. This is the golden age, I'm convinced of it, of the church. It's so dark right now that the darker the night, the brighter the light. If you just love people and serve them, and I really honor the person asking that question.
Yeah.
I have a lot of feelings about what's been going on. I have a lot of feelings about what's going on in this city. I have police officers that are part of our congregation. Last week I just sat down with our chief of police and had a conversation. We also have a lot of Christians that have been deeply impacted and have very strong views that are, pro-police and anti-police. What we saw in this city is what you see in Genesis. You saw one brother take the life of another brother and that blood cry out. So we are actually a family. And we saw other brothers and sisters sitting around watching it happen while it happened. We actually got to see it on video, but if you read in Genesis, what happened with Cain and Abel is what you saw. And so I don't have an enemy in this fight. We're all just one family. And we all have a common enemy in Satan who's really trying to destroy us. And so I think get to know people, but if you'll start with compassion, I think it'll change your perspective. Again, I have lots of thoughts on this. So I probably struggled the most with this question because, all the other stuff I was talking from my head, and with my heart, but with this, I wasn't really sure how we would broach this conversation. Because, it's kind of like showing up at somebody's house after they've gone through a funeral. You're like, hey, how do you talk about this? But I think Matthew 9 helps me start with compassion. Look at the world and realize that people are hurting. And that's why we actually need to not profess faith, but practice it.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate that answer. And I appreciate the, example you guys have continued to set in Potomac Valley. I know sometimes when you are really passionate about defending the oppressed or loving, those who are the have-nots or whatever it may be, that it's so easy for that to morph into enmity with those in power. And even if you don't mean that, sometimes you just, the rhetoric that you're using to defend the oppressed. I know I've been guilty of that, and I've learned from you guys, and so I appreciate that constant reminder. For me, the passage that really speaks to that and reminds me over and over again is one we all know very well, Ephesians 6:12, that our battle's not against flesh and blood, that it's kind of the spiritual battle. And along some of these lines, here's another question. It says, there can be people who view Christianity through a highly individual-oriented mindset that downplays trying to address structural or systemic factors that contribute to poverty. What scriptures do you look to as directing disciples to work on social system factors and not just focus on helping individuals believe, repent, and follow Jesus?
Yes, in my quiet time this week, I'm going to read a scripture that I read in my quiet time this week that really helped me with this. And it's in Exodus 23, and it says, do not spread false reports. Verse 1. Do not help a wicked man by being a malicious witness. Do not follow the crowd in doing wrong. When you give testimony in a lawsuit, do not pervert justice or side with the crowd. And do not show favoritism to the poor man in his lawsuit. If you come by your enemy's ox, if you come across your enemy's ox or donkey wandering off, be sure to take it back to him. If you see the donkey of someone who hates you fallen down under its load, do not leave it there. Be sure that you help him with it. Do not deny justice to your poor people in their lawsuits. Have nothing to do with false charges, and do not put an innocent or an honest person to death, and do not acquit the guilty. Do not accept a bribe, for a bribe blinds those who see it and twist the words of the righteous. Do not oppress an alien, for you yourselves know how it feels to be an alien, because you were aliens in Egypt. Now this is Exodus 23, fresh out of Egypt, Israelites learning how to be. Yeah. And I think the answer is we got to go back to the Bible to learn how to be. Just this one passage of scripture, it cuts on both sides. It's like, don't favor the poor in their lawsuits. Hey, don't favor the rich in their lawsuits. Don't, it's what we're kind of kidding about. Like, you read the scripture, don't spread false reports on Facebook, insert Facebook on Twitter. Like, don't be a part, literally the scripture says, verse 2, do not follow the crowd in doing wrong.
Yeah.
Like,
don't be partisan.
Don't be part. Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
yes.
So we have to be distinctive, and I think this is a difficult but very real challenge. Now, going to the system-wide question, which I think is a really important one, we definitely need to address individual change that needs to happen, but we're called to be the light of the world. It would be unconscionable to see your neighbor's donkey breaking under the load and just walk by. That's what it's saying. Even if it's somebody that hates you, you don't walk by. So if you're aware of injustice in your neighborhood, in your school, in your city, in your town, of course you need to be Joseph in that situation. Of course you need to be Esther in that situation. Of course you need to be Nehemiah in that situation. Of course you need to address the issues that are within our community and in the church. We have these issues. We have systemic issues within our family of churches. You have to deal with that. You can't avoid it and say, peace, peace where there's no peace. You also shouldn't avoid what's going on in the world. The trick is engaging, being embedded in the community where you live, engaging in the community where you live, but not getting entangled in the situations and taking sides, showing partiality. That's really the part that's challenging. For me, that's really hard because these things cut deep. And that's why I have to pray every day, and I need my quiet times. I have no residual Christianity for this. I don't have enough to make it to the next day. I need God, just to make it, because this stuff is real. That's one of the deep convictions that I came out of this, though, for me, Michael, and I'll let Tasha share, is I came out of this period, and I'm coming out of this period from 2019 to 2020, and I realized that in my own faith, there were a lot of things, and my own leadership, there were a lot of areas where I looked the other way, and I didn't deal with things, that I allowed injustice, or I supported injustice, or I just turned a blind eye to injustice, whether it was injustice with the way that women are treated in our community and in our society and in the church, or the way that minorities are treated. And I thought, all right, we can baptize our way out of this problem, or we can focus on the church, or you insert, easy response. These are complicated issues. And so I think we need a comprehensive answer. And the singular answer that I go back to is Jesus came, saw all of this stuff, and his response was, I'm going to build a community that models what this looks like. And I'm going to engage in the world as it is. And I just want to be like Jesus in any situation I find myself in. But that means addressing individual issues. I personally, my conviction, Will Archer's conviction is that means addressing systemic issues. I prefer if we didn't have to. I don't personally love conflict, but we're in the middle of it. So what I got to be a Christian in the conflict. I don't know about you, Tosh.
Yeah, that was a lot. That was a lot. I'll add this. Right after George Floyd was killed, we went to a rally, and there was the chief of police there, and a huge representation of police there. This was in Virginia. And this little boy, 4 years old, walked right up to the police officer and said, "Why did this happen?" And so the police officer standing there, and he's blown away that this little 4-year-old is asking him this, and he explains, I hate that this happened, and that the police officer that did that does not represent me. And he explained his whole thought process of this should not ever happen, and I hate that it has happened. And then the little boy said, "Okay, well, I'm watching you." And the police officer said, you know what, I need that accountability. Keep watching me. Oh, wow.
My dog has decided to protect Will.
Yes, I see that. Hello.
You did.
Yes.
Hey, welcome.
That was a perfect interruption.
That was perfect.
So my point being, we need to be like little children. You know, he was bold enough to ask the question and bold enough to say, I'm going to hold you accountable to change.
Yeah.
And that's how we need to be.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. And this stuff is real. I mean, I'm the exact same age as George Floyd would have been. I mean, I'm 46 years old. And so, you know, I had a lot of emotions even just coming here on this trip, just thinking about everything that's happened and how that's impacted our community, impacted all of us.
And we're going to go see that site tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yeah, which I'm looking forward to. But yeah, no, I appreciate that question.
Yeah.
Simple answer, I think we got to address systemic issues.
Yep.
This is my conviction. But that conviction is not born out of my opinion. It's born out of my study of Scripture and how God's always responded to the world. But it starts, honestly, with you have to model it in your own house, in your own home.
All right. I have a question that comes from our campus minister.
Yes.
All right.
Hit it.
He wants to know, and I called him out. That's why I said who this is coming from. He wants to know what your thoughts are on black licorice. Does it prevent people from getting COVID?
What?
Now, I would tell you,
Okay.
this is persecution of me. This
Right,
is what's
right.
happening here. Because I like black licorice.
Oh my God.
So
Is that your
the whole
COVID
staff-
treatment? Is that your
No,
COVID treatment? Okay.
the staff persecutes me about that. And then there was an article that somebody was claiming that black
Oh
licorice
my
prevented
gosh.
COVID.
Sure.
And so
Why?
they then transferred that to me and claimed that that's why I like
Why?
black licorice.
So just for everybody that's online,
Black licorice
so
does not.
a black
cure
licorice, to
COVID.
my knowledge, does not prevent the flu. And
Yes.
COVID is in the same kind of world as that. So, you know, no to black licorice. Now, red licorice, maybe.
What?
I'm kidding. No, it does not. No, it does not.
Okay, so here's
I'm
one.
glad I was able to help.
Yes,
That's in my medical opinion.
Yes.
no, that's important. That's important.
Oh.
Yeah.
Shaka is awakened now.
Yes.
That's right.
No, I was going to say I could tell that you're good folks because she immediately came in and decided to lay at your feet, Will, and protect you.
Yes.
But now she's seeing things in the neighborhood
Yeah.
that you need protected
Yes.
from.
Amen.
So ignore those barks.
Oh.
Here's a question from a young married couple. What's your best advice for a young married couple looking to move out of state and particularly going to unfamiliar territory with very little family and friends? I think perhaps they're getting moved to an area where there's not a church, there's not a lot of family and friends. Neither of them have lived out of state before. What would be your advice to approaching a situation like that?
Yeah, so we've moved a lot.
Yep.
And so in terms of advice, I'd say, you know, you got to build friendships right away. You want to hit the ground running, building friendships. Stay connected with the people that you have relationships with right now. You know, what's great about the world that we live in is you can stay connected digitally, but build relationships where you are, I think, where you're going. I think that's really critical. Moving is really hard. There's a grief related to moving, even if it's this fantastic move for whether it's a new job or a new responsibility or education or family. It's still hard. Get used to being in a new place. And so I'd say hit the ground running, building relationships. That's what we've learned from our moves is the moves that have gone well have been where day one, where like we need to actually make sure we get plugged in. A lot of times you can be tempted to kind of like, we're moving, we're just gonna be together, and then we'll get to people eventually, and you'll forget, and before you know it, 6 months, you're drifting. So I'd say hit the day one, make sure you get plugged in.
Yes. And I'd also say, with all of my moves, it's been a million of them, I've prayed specifically for relationships, for my kids, for me, for my husband, very, very specifically. And whatever the need was during the time we were moving, that was the need I prayed for it to meet in those friendships. So God just, he blessed that. And I went there looking for the answers to those prayers. So that propelled me to, reach out to the people in the church around me, reach out to, and I continue to pray, God, is this the one? Are these the people? And God will always make it so clear. These are the people that I want you to be connected to.
Absolutely. He
All
does.
right. We're going to call this one the last question. We got a lot more, but I think this is a good one to end on. And to give a little context, the geography of the Twin Cities, you have kind of Minneapolis and then St. Paul. We're actually in a place called Roseville. It's right smack in between the two.
Okay.
And then around that, you have a lot of, smaller suburb type or smaller communities, St. Louis Park, Edina, Woodbury, all the way around. And so the question is, in Minneapolis, St. Paul, as in many big cities, we're made up of many cities. Would you recommend each one starting in our local cities where we live with our family groups, or in the larger Minneapolis, St. Paul metro, to possibly have a larger impact, though many of us don't actually live in Minneapolis, St. Paul proper?
It's a great question. So in the next 28 years, give or take, we should have about 10 billion people on the planet. So population growth is just exploding. The world's getting bigger
Which makes me feel old, because I remember being in school and it was like 3 or 4 billion.
I know.
And they were like, how can it get any bigger?
And it just keeps growing.
It
just keeps growing. Yeah, I know. We're at 7 billion. We're going to have another 3 billion added. I mean, the world's growing. The internet's exploding. This is a really dynamic time, right? So things are big, 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 big. Here's the thing. The bigger things get, the smaller we need to focus. And I think, so my answer is this. I think one of the key things is to recognize it starts with an individual, a family, a street, and then a local community. And so I think we really do need to get into the local communities. Also, the doors are easiest to go through in a smaller community.
Yeah.
Because your approach can be tailored towards that local community. And when I look at the history of the early church and their impact and the diverse ways that they brought a common message to different communities, it shows me really that the roadmap is to go small. So I think if you want to reach all, you got to go small. That's what I would say. I love big cities. I think definitely there's something grand about, like, we're reaching a city, but what does that really mean? You're usually just claiming that you're reaching a city and you're still just reaching a small group of people. I think there's a lot more impact in getting into small communities. But for the people that are in the city, that's your city.
Right.
But like you said, in big cities are made up of small communities. That's one of the things we learned in Philly. You're like, Philadelphia, but Philadelphia is a city of lots of small communities. So you really have to, know people that are in these smaller communities.
Amen.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great. I think I just saw the highest praise in my eyes, which is my wife was watching from California, well on a shift at the hospital, and said, this is great, amazing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And, such a great night. This has been so helpful and inspiring, and people are inspired, and I keep getting more and more messages to pass that on, how grateful people are. It's been amazing to have an evening with Will Archer, but wait, you got 2 for the price of 1, because we had Tasha Archer
So much better.
as well. And what a great evening. We're drawing it to a close. But wait, there's more, because you could come tomorrow to Minnehaha Academy and see this amazing couple live and in person. Join us. You can actually meet them. You can give them, can they give you a hug or a finger?
I love hugs.
She loves hugs.
We're double vaccinated.
Yes.
Double vax.
We're double vaxxed.
All right.
We're double vaxxed.
Okay, as am I, and who knows if we have to be triple or quadruple
I know, right?
in the future, but
I'll be there.
yeah, whatever. Whatever. Make sure to join us tomorrow, 10 a.m., Minnehaha Academy. Be there live if you can. And if you can't, we will be live streaming. Is that correct, Josh? Yes, we will be live streaming, but we'd rather see you in person. So thanks again, Will and Tasha.
My pleasure.
And we'll see you tomorrow.
Look forward to seeing you. Thanks so much.
Bye. Thank you, guys.